Welcome to Foundations of Applied Behaviour Analysis, commonly referred to as ABA. Thank you for being interested in learning more about ABA in relation to your child and for taking the time to join me today. My name is Courtney, and I'm an ASD consultant at Kinark Child and Family Services. Please take time to pause this video as needed to reflect on the information being shared, and take notes that you can refer to later that will help you think about how this information relates to you, your child, and your family. Let's get started. This presentation will provide an overview of ABA, including characteristics of ABA, reinforcement, the ABCs of behavior, and functions of behavior. After today's training, you will be able to define ABA and describe its use with Autism Spectrum Disorder, define behavior and provide examples and non-examples of definitions of behavior, identify key principles of reinforcement, list the 4 main functions of behavior, and describe common ABA terminology. What is ABA? ABA is an applied science based on the principles of learning and behavior. ABA uses these principles to assess, understand, and teach behaviors that are important to individuals, their families, and their communities. Behavioral services can be offered in different forms and intensities, such as comprehensive ABA interventions, focused ABA interventions, and caregiver training. When you begin behavioral services, you will work with your service provider to determine the best fit for your child and your family. Why learn about ABA? As a parent of a child with ASD, you might ask yourself, why is this information important, and how can it help my child? There is a strong research evidence base for the use of applied behavior analysis in treatment for children with ASD. This is why ABA is the core component of the Ontario Autism Program. ABA maximizes your opportunities for teaching your child instead of simply reacting to challenging situations. As your child learns new skills, this may improve their outcomes. ABA-based teaching strategies can be used everywhere and by everyone, at home, in the community, and at school. And it is important to learn about ABA to understand the terminology used by ABA teams so that you can effectively collaborate with your child's service provider and be active in your child's treatment planning. The role of parents in their child's ABA program is crucial in terms of the child's overall progress. Parents need to be aware and fully informed about all areas of their child's program so that they can help their child generalize and apply the skills learned during therapy to everyday life situations. The Ontario Autism Program calls for family-centered services, promoting collaborative partnerships between care providers, children, and their families. Each child, youth, and family is unique. Family is what is constant in a child's life, and family has expertise in their child's abilities, interests, and needs. All decisions about supports and services for your child will be made in partnership with you. Let's discuss some myths and facts about ABA. One myth about ABA that you may have heard is that ABA only works with kids. The truth is that ABA works with individuals of all ages, including geriatric patients. Another myth is that ABA only works with autism. In truth, ABA works in many fields, such as brain injury, mental health, and business, such as applications within workplace safety protocols. A third myth is that ABA doesn't allow for individuality, when in fact, good ABA therapy addresses the uniqueness and interpersonal relationships of individuals, including teaching skills such as complex language, social interaction, problem solving, and flexible thinking. A fourth myth is that ABA is just table work. While ABA therapy programs may involve sitting at a table to learn and practice skills, ABA therapy is not only table work. Therapy might occur in the backyard, around the house, in the community, and at school, and anywhere else the child needs to be able to learn and apply skills. ABA also involves a lot of time spent engaging in fun, reinforcing activities to ensure that the child is enjoying therapy time. Myth number 5 is that ABA makes people reliant on praise and reinforcement. One of the most misunderstood concepts of ABA is the value and importance of reinforcement. We will talk more about reinforcement soon and how, in life, the things that we do that are followed by positive changes in our environment are most often the things we choose to do again. Finally, you may have heard the myth that ABA turns kids into robots. But when done correctly, ABA will maximize a child's ability to express their own personality and preferences by teaching them the skills they need to communicate, play, and otherwise enjoy life, by teaching them how to learn. Using ABA can help a child with ASD build useful repertoires and develop new skills such as learning to ask for preferred items, responding to one's name, or completing a task on one's own. Using ABA can also help children with ASD reduce challenging behaviors such as decrease crying and tantrum behaviors, eliminate eye poking, or decrease running away in community settings. Using ABA can help children with ASD maintain and transfer appropriate behaviors such as sitting appropriately for dinner at home and at a restaurant, or asking either an adult or peer for a preferred toy. Individuals with ASD demonstrate behavioral deficits, behaviors that do not occur often enough, and excesses, behaviors that occur too often. Therefore, the goal of behavioral strategies is to increase behaviors when there are deficits, such as increasing social skills, communication, or self-help skills, and decrease behaviors where there are excesses, such as reducing aggression, self-injury, or speaking out loud. Target behaviors should be beneficial to the individual. This means we should teach behaviors that are useful and address skill gaps. Target behaviors should also be realistic and attainable. The child should have the necessary prerequisite skills to learn the new skill, and the behavior should be developmentally appropriate. And target behaviors should be measurable. If you can see or hear the behavior, it is measurable. As we talk about how to determine which behavior deserves attention first, and how to create an order to prioritize when additional behaviors will be addressed, think about the goals you have for your child and how you might prioritize these goals. Let's start at the bottom of the pyramid with our high priority behaviors. Does the behavior pose any danger to the child or to others? Behaviors that cause injury or destruction, such as biting someone's arm, throwing chairs, or running into the street, must be our first priority. Then we can consider addressing behaviors that prevent learning, such as flopping on the floor at school or fixating on lights in the room. Next, it is important to think about behaviors that interfere with life routines, such as a child needing to be first all the time or eating too quickly. Once we have addressed behaviors that influence the safety and well-being of our child, and have started to build skills that will allow the child to function as independently as possible, we can consider other behaviors we might label annoying, or behaviors that cause minor problems, like touching the walls in the hallway or asking the same question over and over. Many behaviors could be minor problems or major problems, depending on the circumstances. For example, flicking a piece of string may be just an annoying fixation. But flicking a piece of string may become a major problem if the child is pulling strings from other people's shoes, coats, or sweaters, or even vertical blinds, or flicking the string in such a way that it becomes a safety risk to the child or others because it accidentally gets flicked into an eye. Referring to these guidelines may help you select which goals from your list you will start with. What is ABA? Applied Behavior Analysis is applied. That means ABA focuses on real-world, socially important issues that are important to the individual and the community as a whole. Applied Behavior Analysis is behavior. Behavior is anything we say or do. Applied Behavior Analysis is analytic. ABA shows us how behavior is affected by the environment. To understand this relationship, we use data collection and data analysis. Let's talk about the defining characteristics of ABA in more detail. Applied Behavior Analysis is applied. Goals and interventions are selected because they are socially significant to the individual and to caregivers. ABA-based interventions should focus on behavior change that enhances and improves the quality of life for the individual and caregivers. Examples of applied goals might be to teach a child social skills or language skills. Applied Behavior Analysis focuses on behavior. Behavior is anything a person says or does, not just problem behavior. Tying your shoe is a behavior. Throwing your shoe is also a behavior. When we define behavior, we need to describe exactly what we see and be specific. If you say, the behavior I would like to see reduced is when my child has a tantrum, that does not describe a behavior. What I think tantrum means could be different from what you think tantrum means. So, instead of using the label tantrum, describe the behavior in an observable way, such as, I would like to see my child stop dropping to the floor while kicking and screaming. That is a much clearer description of the behavior, and the best way to measure that behavior can be determined, such as timing how long the kicking and screaming lasts, or counting how many times the child kicks or screams. Remember, good behavior is also behavior. We tend to think of behavior as bad, but in reality, everything we do is a behavior. When we define behavior, we describe what the behavior looks and sounds like. For example, he sits in the corner of the gym facing the wall during basketball games. We also use clear and simple language, and we avoid language that implies motivation. We would never say, he won't participate because he hates gym. We avoid using jargon or words that are difficult to understand in our definitions. Let's test our knowledge of behavioral definitions and see if we can find the sentences that define behavior. Number 1. Would you select A, he had a good day today, or B, he followed the classroom routine today? If you selected he followed the classroom routine today, you are correct. Question 2. Would you select A, she gets frustrated when she is playing, or B, she throws toys? If you think she throws toys is the behavioral definition in question 2, you're right. Question number 3. Would you select A, he screams and flops to the floor, or B, he had a tantrum, meltdown? He screams and flops to the floor is the behavioral definition in question 3. Question number 4. Would you select A, he has trouble focusing, he doesn't pay attention? Or B, he does not remain at an activity for more than 2 minutes? He does not remain at an activity for more than 2 minutes is the behavioral definition in question 4. The other sentences do not describe observable or measurable behaviors, but instead our interpretation of what has happened. Applied behavior analysis is analytic. Interventions are selected based on collected data. Ongoing data monitoring is essential to ensure the strategies being used are effective or to determine if modifications to the intervention are needed. We use data collection when delivering ABA-based interventions to understand the relationship between the environment and the behavior. Data collection provides a baseline measure of behavior. For example, if you were participating in a weight loss program, in order to know if the program is working or not, you need to know your weight when you started Baseline measures of behavior can help us see subtle changes and if we are on the right track. Data collection helps to create a theory about the possible purpose for why the behavior is occurring. For example, collecting data about what happens immediately before a child displays a challenging behavior might help us recognize the child's warning signs that the behavior is going to occur, like clenched fists, frowning, or folded arms. We could also collect data on what happens immediately after a child displays challenging behavior to see what that child might be getting that is maintaining that behavior, like being allowed to eat candy or watch TV after crying. We can use data collection to help discover patterns of behavior and provide us with information to create an effective treatment plan. Once your child is in therapy, you will see lots of graphs, so it's important you have a basic understanding of how to read them. Here are some basic examples of graphs. The first graph shows us that the child's behavior is increasing after the intervention was implemented. For example, if this was data collected on how many times the child chose to read a book during free time, you could see that, during baseline data collection, the child selected books 2 or 3 times every session. Once the intervention began to teach the child to select reading books during free time, maybe instead of playing on the iPad, you can see the child is now choosing to read books between 5 to 8 times each session. The second graph shows us the child's behavior is somewhat stable. For example, if this was data collected on how many chips the child ate during snack, you could see that, during baseline, the child ate 5 to 6 chips each session. After the intervention began to teach the child to eat apple slices instead of chips, the child continued to eat 4 to 6 chips each session. This data suggests that the intervention strategies should be modified because the child has not learned to eat less chips with the current intervention so far. The third graph shows us the child's behavior is decreasing. For example, if this data was collected on how many times the child chose to play on the iPad during free time, you could see that, during baseline, the child chose to play on the iPad 7 to 9 times each session. After the intervention began to teach the child to select reading books instead of playing on the iPad, the child chose to play on the iPad 1 to 6 times each session. This data suggests that the intervention strategies should continue because the child is learning to select the iPad less. And if we compare that with the first graph, we see that the child is selecting to read books instead. We've talked about how applied behavior analysis is applied, behavioral, and analytic. Applied behavior analysis is also generalizable. For many students with ASD, they may have difficulties displaying certain skills with different instructions, or in unfamiliar settings, or with new people, or when different materials are provided. Therefore, we need to plan for generalization or transfer to occur. Independence is going to look different for each child. Some children will learn to complete tasks on their own, while other children may learn to complete tasks with help from others. It is important to ensure that once our children have learned skills, that they continue to use these skills correctly and quickly across all environments. One way that we might plan for generalization to occur is by using the 3 by 3 by 3 rule. This means teaching the child to perform the skill with at least 3 different adults, 3 different materials, and in 3 different locations. Parent involvement is important for helping to generalize and maintain skills initially learned in a therapy setting to ensure that the child displays these skills in the home and in the community as well. Now, let's talk about key concepts in ABA: reinforcement, the ABCs of behavior, and functions of behavior. A reinforcer is an item or event that increases the future likelihood of the behavior occurring. For example, let's say you have spent extra time ensuring that a handwritten worksheet at school is completed neatly. The teacher sees your worksheet and says, "Excellent, great job." The next time the teacher gives you a worksheet, you spend extra time again to ensure your handwriting is neat. We can say that verbal praise from the teacher is a reinforcer because it is now more likely that you will continue to print neatly on your worksheets. Or maybe your child enjoys eating brownies. So if they eat all their vegetables at supper time, you give them a brownie for dessert. If you notice that your child is consuming more vegetables, that brownie may be a reinforcer. Or maybe you have a job that offers you more money if you work evenings, weekends, or holidays. So you start to work outside of your regular schedule. We could say that money is your reinforcer. There are 4 important factors in the use of a reinforcer: deprivation, immediacy, size, and contingency. This can be remembered by the acronym DISC, D-I-S-C. The effectiveness of a reinforcer can change if a child hasn't had a particular item for a long time. This is called deprivation. When a person hasn't had access to a particular reinforcer for a significant period of time, the value of the reinforcer increases. Here is an example of the effective use of deprivation to increase the likelihood that your child will behave appropriately for access to a particular reinforcer. Your child hasn't had chocolate in almost 3 weeks. Chocolate is their favorite candy, and they have been deprived of this tasty treat for an extended period of time. At snack time, you say to your child, "It's time for snack. First, tidy up your toys, and then you can have some chocolate." If you've had difficulty in the past with your child stopping their game and putting away their toys when you ask, the availability of chocolate may motivate your child to comply with your request. Here is an example of the ineffective use of deprivation. Your child has been playing with their toys while snacking on a box of chocolate open beside them. At snack time, you take away the box of chocolate and say to your child, "It's time for snack. First, tidy up your toys, and then you can finish this box of chocolates." It's likely that your child may have eaten enough of the chocolate already and is not motivated to stop playing with their toys and tidy up. The second important factor in the effective use of a reinforcer is immediacy. The more immediate the delivery of the reinforcer after the behavior, the more effective the reinforcer. You want to consider delivering the reinforcer to your child as quickly as possible after the behavior occurs, or even while the behavior is still occurring. Waiting more than a few seconds or after a minute has passed may be too long after the behavior has occurred to effectively use a reinforcer. Here is an example of the effective use of immediacy to increase the likelihood that the reinforcer will in fact lead to the increase of appropriate behavior for your child. You watch your child tidy away the last toy on the shelf. You have a chocolate hidden in your hand and immediately offer it to them saying, "Thanks for cleaning up your toys. Here's a chocolate." Here is an example of the ineffective use of immediacy. Your child finished tidying their toys. You say, "Come to the kitchen. I've got a special treat for you." While you're looking through the cupboards for the chocolate bar you've hidden, your child starts crying because they are hungry for a snack. If you provide the chocolate now, what behavior are you reinforcing? If you said crying, you are correct. You don't want to reinforce an inappropriate behavior such as crying. So now, you have to help your child calm down and redirect them to sit at the table before you can deliver the chocolate reinforcer. When you have a reinforcer immediately available after an appropriate behavior, you can use the reinforcer more effectively and avoid the risk of missing the opportunity to provide reinforcement altogether or accidentally reinforcing an inappropriate behavior. Before you give your child a demand, can you ask yourself, am I ready to deliver a reinforcer immediately to my child if he complies with my demand? The third important factor in the effective use of a reinforcer is its size. If the child believes that the amount or size of the reinforcer is worth the effort to behave appropriately, then we can consider that a more effective reinforcer. Here is an example of the effective use of size to increase the likelihood that your child will behave appropriately for access to a particular reinforcer. Your child is learning to tidy up their toys independently. You explain that if they put away 3 toys by themselves, they may have 3 pieces of chocolate before they finish tidying up the rest of their toys. You know your child loves to eat 2 to 3 pieces of chocolate at a time, so this reinforcer will likely meet their size requirements. Here is an example of the ineffective use of size. You explain to your child that if they put away 3 toys by themselves, they may have 1 piece of chocolate before they finish tidying the rest of their toys. You know that your child cries for more chocolate every time they only get 1 piece. And your child is used to getting 3 pieces of chocolate for eating his vegetables, so 1 piece of chocolate is likely an ineffective reinforcer because the size of the reinforcer is not worthwhile to the child and could result in challenging behavior when you try to offer them only 1 piece of chocolate. Consider asking yourself, is this amount of reinforcement worthwhile for my child? This may also come into play when using a video or a game as a reinforcer. For some children, access to a video or game for 30 seconds means interrupting that video and may not be reinforcing for that child. The fourth important factor in the effective use of a reinforcer is contingency. A reinforcer should be delivered only contingent on, or after you see, the desired behavior. This will result in a more effective reinforcer. Here is an example of the effective use of contingency to increase the likelihood that the reinforcer will in fact lead to the increase of appropriate behavior for your child. You instruct your child to tidy up their toys. You can prove that they completed your request from the result of their work and can see all the toys have been placed back on the shelf. The reinforcer will be more effective because you know that the desired behavior was actually completed. Here is an example of the ineffective use of contingency. You instruct your child to tidy up their toys and to come see you in the kitchen when they are done. You did not check to see if the toys were all placed back on the shelf when they came into the kitchen. So, they may not have put all of the toys away. The reinforcer may not be effective in increasing the likelihood that your child will tidy up their toys because they may have received chocolate even though they did not put away all of their toys. Consider asking yourself, was the reinforcer given only when the desired behavior occurred? Remember, whether or not a consequence is reinforcing is based on how the child experiences it and not how we perceive it. What we may see as reinforcing, the child may find aversive. For example, we may enjoy a high five and being told, "Great job," but our child may not like physical contact or loud voices. So, a high five and excited verbal praise may punish the behavior instead of reinforce it. Or we may not like being alone in a dark room, but our child may like to sit by themselves in a quiet space free from distractions. So how can we determine what may be potential reinforcers for our child? We can complete preference assessments to identify items or activities that are most likely to function as reinforcers. A child's preference for various items or activities might be determined by merely asking what he or she likes. You could ask the child questions such as, "What do you like to do in your free time?" Or you could give the child a list of choices and ask what they like, or ask them to rank their choices from most to least preferred. You could also ask yourself or your child's other caregivers, their siblings, friends, or teachers to identify the activities, items, foods, hobbies, or toys that they believe the child prefers. A preference assessment can also be conducted by observing and recording what activities the child engages in when he or she can choose during a period of unrestricted access to a variety of activities. You could set up the environment with a variety of items that you think your child might like that they can see and access easily. Then you can note which items your child selects and how long they play with each item. Experimenting through stimulus preference assessments can also be conducted to record how the child responds to various items or activities. If you have a service provider that conducts stimulus preference assessments with your child, you can ask them for more information on what kinds of assessments they are performing and what the data suggest regarding potential reinforcers for your child. Many people confuse reinforcement and bribery or think that they're the same thing. Let's look at the differences. Reinforcement follows behavior and results in an increase in future behavior, while bribery is the act of offering a preferred item or activity in an attempt to influence a behavior in the moment. Reinforcement is provided following the desired behavior, but bribed behaviors occur only after receiving the reward first. Finally, reinforcement strengthens, maintains, and increases future behavior, while bribery only influences the behavior in that moment. Now you can see how reinforcement and bribery are different. I've said it before and I will say it again. Reinforcement can be a powerful thing. Reinforcement can be used to help a child learn new desirable behaviors or skills, and it can unknowingly teach undesirable behaviors. There may be times when a behavior is accidentally reinforced, and then the behavior continues to occur in the future because it now has a history of reinforcement. Superstitions, or certain rituals, are a prime example of a behavior that was accidentally reinforced. For example, Serena Williams, one of the best tennis players in the world, does not change her socks throughout the tournament because keeping on the same socks, perhaps, at some point was followed by her winning a match. Often, superstitious behaviors are not really harmful or inappropriate. However, there may be times when an undesired or problem behavior is accidentally reinforced and therefore continues to occur because it worked that one time or those few times to get the child what they wanted. The next few slides will illustrate some examples of the power of reinforcement. This may be a familiar scene from the grocery store. A parent is trying to load their purchases onto the checkout counter while their child screams beside them, trying to reach a chocolate bar on the shelf nearby. The parent says, "Shh, you don't need chocolate." But the child continues to scream and even starts to cry. The parent quickly grabs the chocolate bar and gives it to the child. The child immediately stops screaming and crying because he received exactly what he wanted. The parent may have stopped their child from crying for now, but what about the next time the child wants an item and is told no? It is likely that the child will begin to scream and cry again because he has learned, through reinforcement, that this behavior gets him exactly what he wants. Now, the parent finds themselves trying to calm their screaming child every time they go to the grocery store. This scenario is particularly challenging because, while reinforcing the child's crying increases the future likelihood that the behavior will occur again, giving their child a chocolate bar is reinforcing to the parent because the child stops crying. Saying no to their child, listening to him scream, and watching other customers shake their heads disapprovingly is not reinforcing to the parent, but may have the better long-term effect. This may be another familiar example. You come home from work exhausted, but you manage to find the energy to make supper, clean the dishes, help the kids with their homework, and get everyone to bed at a reasonable hour. You sink into the couch for a moment to catch your breath, and your child saunters down the stairs to join you on the couch. You say, "I don't think so," and walk your child back up to her room. As you close her door, she starts to cry. "Sit with me." You calmly explain, "You can go to sleep by yourself." But she continues to cry. Exhausted, you sit down beside her and say, "Okay, stop crying and close your eyes." When she falls asleep, you go back to relaxing on the couch. You may have thought that this was a one-time occurrence, but now that you know about the power of reinforcement, what do you think will happen tomorrow night? It is likely that your child will come back out of her room and try to sit with you, or get you to sit in her room because she has learned how to delay going to bed and gain extra attention from you. Both examples of reinforcement. And how is your behavior being reinforced? The faster you can get your child to sleep, even if that means sitting with her, the faster you can have free time to recharge your batteries. Allowing your child to sit with you, or sitting with your child until she falls asleep, also allows you to escape from listening to her cry. But it sets a difficult precedent. I think it's safe to say that a lot of children love technology. The iPad, TV, computer. Let's say your child is on the computer watching his favorite YouTube video. It's almost time for dinner, and you ask your child to turn off the computer and wash his hands for dinner. He pretends he didn't hear you and continues to watch his video. You repeat your request, and he replies, "No!" You're busy in the kitchen, so you leave him on the computer and finish preparing dinner. A few minutes later, you ask him, again, to turn off the computer and wash his hands. He screams no and starts crying. You say, "Okay, 5 more minutes." You think to yourself that it will take you approximately 5 minutes to set the table, and then you can make sure he turns off the computer and washes his hands. Given what you know about the power of reinforcement, what do you think will happen after the 5 minutes are up? What do you think will happen tomorrow night when computer time is over and it's time for dinner? The child has likely learned that screaming no and crying gets him more time on the computer, so he is more likely to continue to engage in this behavior the next time you ask him to turn off the computer and wash his hands for dinner. Reinforcement also leads to desired behaviors occurring again in the future. Think about a parent who went to an ABA workshop and decided that she would give her son extra time to use his electronics every night if he completed all of his homework. When her son comes home from school, she tells him that if he completes all of his homework, he can spend an extra 15 minutes on his iPad that night. He loves playing games on his iPad, so he becomes motivated to complete his homework. He quickly takes out his homework and completes all of it in the next hour. Later that night, after all of his siblings had to put away their technology and get ready for bed, he was allowed to continue to use his iPad for another 15 minutes. He bragged about it to his siblings and was really happy for the next 15 minutes. What do you think happens the next day? Will he be more likely or less likely to complete his homework? Of course, he will be far more likely to complete all of his homework the next night. Once you understand the concept of reinforcement, it is important to know how to use it to increase desired behaviors. One of the simplest things you can do is catch your child red-handed doing something desired. For example, catch them doing their homework, sharing with their siblings, or getting ready for bed when asked, and reward those behaviors using praise or offering their favorite items or activities. A reward, or a reinforcer, should follow immediately after a desired behavior in order to pair that behavior with the reward. If the reward is not immediate and occurs in the distant future, the reward may not be immediate enough to increase your child's behavior. Having long periods of time between the behavior and the reward may also increase the risk of an undesired behavior occurring in between the desired behavior and the reward. Then, you may unknowingly reinforce the undesired behavior. You also want to make sure that you and all those involved in your child's care are consistent. This will ensure that dad and grandma are reinforcing the exact same behavior in the exact same way as mom and teacher. Without this consistency, you may notice that your child engages in a certain behavior with one parent but not another, like crying for chocolate with one parent but not another. Or, worse, it may take your child much longer to learn a valuable skill due to the inconsistencies in reinforcement delivery. Make sure rewards are effective. What is considered rewarding for one person is not necessarily rewarding for another. You will have to choose appropriate rewards, and remember that rewards can lose their effectiveness, meaning that an object or activity that may have value for the child can temporarily lose its value due to an environmental change, which we discussed earlier describing deprivation. Another example may be if a reward is playing on the playground, but the child dislikes getting wet and it's currently raining. The child may not want to go play, and therefore the child will not have the motivation to engage in the desired behaviors that allow him to go play at that time. As we've discussed earlier, the effectiveness of a reinforcer does not depend on what you determine is a valuable reinforcer. Anything can be a reinforcer. If it increases the future rates of the behavior it follows, it's a reinforcer. So you will know it is an effective reinforcer if it results in a subsequent increase in a desired behavior. No matter how much an individual likes a particular reward, it will lose its effectiveness if it is used extensively over a long period of time. This situation can be avoided by using a variety of rewards and reinforcers, or recycling them frequently by making items unavailable for a period of time and then reintroducing them later. For example, a child who loves puzzles could get tired of the same puzzle or end up disliking puzzles altogether if a limited number of puzzles are always used as reinforcers to teach desired behaviors. Giving your child the opportunity to choose their reinforcer is always a good idea. There is ample evidence to suggest that using those items or activities that a child is interested in that given moment, are more effective in behavior change than arbitrarily choosing reinforcers for the child. You may decide to complete a quick and informal preference assessment by letting the child pick from an array of potential reinforcers, or, if possible, simply ask the child what he or she would like to work for. Pair toys and food rewards with praise. Linking praise with a more enjoyable reward helps to make your praise more rewarding. After many pairings of praise with another reward, the child may come to respond to praise alone, allowing you to fade out your food and activity reinforcers and maintain the behavior with just praise. When you're delivering praise, remember to label the specific behavior. For example, nice sitting, good listening, fantastic waiting, I love how you're looking at me. Finally, you want to reinforce more often in the beginning when teaching a new behavior. Each occurrence of that new behavior should be reinforced in the beginning so that the child has more opportunities to practice the skill and learns the relationship between that behavior and the reward. Over time, it is ideal to reduce the frequency and magnitude of the reinforcers to mimic reinforcement available in your child's environment. Next, let's cover the ABCs of behavior: antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. An antecedent is any event that occurs immediately before a behavior. A behavior is the observable behavior displayed by the child in response to the antecedent. A consequence is what happens immediately after a behavior. In the first example, the antecedent is that a child cannot open a container. The behavior is the child saying, "Help me, please." The consequence is the parent opens the container. In the second example, the antecedent is that a child cannot pierce the straw in the juice box. The behavior is the child throwing the juice box at the parent. The consequence is the parent puts the straw in the juice box and gives it to the child. In both examples, the child has received what they want by performing a certain behavior. The child in the first example will likely learn from this interaction that if he needs help, he can ask for help and receive it. The child in the second example will likely learn from the interaction that if she needs help, she can throw the item at her parent and she will receive help. In the future, when each child needs help, the first child is more likely to ask for help, and the second child is more likely to throw objects at people. You may be wondering about the importance of events that occur before the antecedent, such as your child only sleeping 3 hours the night before, or your child having a cough and a runny nose, or your child hasn't eaten all day. We call these setting events. Setting events increase the likelihood that an antecedent will trigger a behavior. So, it is important to be aware of these events that may set the occasion for behavior to occur. How we react to a behavior can determine whether or not the behavior will continue in the future. Remember that reinforcement occurs when something is added or removed immediately following a behavior and increases the future likelihood of that behavior occurring again in similar situations. For example, if a teacher says, "Do your math," this is the antecedent, and the child completes his math work, this is the behavior, and the teacher gives a sticker to the child, this is the consequence, and the child enjoys receiving the sticker, then in the future, when the child is told to do their math, it is likely that they will comply because they were rewarded last time. Alternatively, punishment occurs when something is added or removed immediately following a behavior and decreases the future likelihood of that behavior occurring again in similar situations. For example, if a teacher says, "Do your math," the antecedent, and the child completes his math, the behavior, and the teacher gives a high five and cheers loudly, the consequence, and the child does not like the physical contact or loud cheering, this decreases the likelihood that he will complete his math in the future when asked. A consequence may be reinforcing or punishing based on how the child experiences it, not how we perceive it. Let's look one more time at the ABCs of behavior. The behavior, B, is preceded by the antecedent, A, and is followed by the consequence, C. And depending on whether the consequence is reinforcing or punishing, the behavior will either increase or decrease in the future. So if your phone rings and you see on the caller ID that your friend is calling you, you pick up the phone and say hello. This is followed by an enjoyable conversation with your friend. But you don't always pick up the phone and say hello when your phone rings, because you have learned that when your phone rings, but you see it as your mother-in-law calling you, you ignore the call. When you do this, you feel relieved because you have avoided listening to the helpful advice that your mother-in-law always calls to share. When we consider changing a behavior, whether that is increasing a functional skill, like appropriately greeting parents and teachers, or decreasing a behavior, like aggression, it is important to consider the function of that behavior. The term function may sound fancy, but it essentially means the variables that maintain the behavior, or more simply put, the reasons why that behavior occurs in the first place. Understanding the reason why a behavior occurs is extremely beneficial in planning an appropriate intervention. Why do we do what we do? Why do we engage in any behavior? We engage in behaviors because they either get us out of something that we don't want or get us something that we do want. Take a moment to think about the following examples. Why do you put on your seatbelt? So that you can stop the annoying seatbelt alert noise in your car. That's getting out of something. Why do you let the phone ring when a telemarketer calls? So that you can avoid explaining why you don't need a new credit card. That's getting out of something or avoiding it altogether. Why do you take Advil? So that you can get rid of a headache. That's getting out of something. Why do you say hello to your coworker in the hallway? So that they look at you and smile. That's something you like and want. Why do you go to the bank? So that you can cash your paycheck. That's also something you like and want. Like us, our children also do everything for a reason. Also like us, different things have different values. We like our hard work being rewarded with money, and our child may like their hard work to be rewarded with chocolate. So, whether we are talking about our own behavior or that of our children, there are specific reasons why we behave. All of our behaviors are purposeful. There are 4 common functions or reasons for behavior, which we will be discussing next. The dreaded early morning wake-up. Why do we hit the snooze button on our alarm? The antecedent to this behavior is you are sleeping in your warm, cozy, comfortable bed when your alarm clock sounds with an annoying ring. The behavior? You roll over and hit the snooze button. The consequence to this behavior is that annoying sound stops, which means you terminated something bad, and you get to rest in your comfy bed some more, which means you also got access to something great. And this is the function of why so many of us hit the snooze button every morning. When we discuss behavior, we usually describe the function and topography of the behavior. Function means why a behavior occurs, and topography means what it looks like. If a child aggresses toward his sister, and we describe that behavior as Jimmy kicked his sister, then we are describing the topography of the behavior. Topography only describes what the behavior is. It says nothing about why the behavior occurred. This is where the function of behavior is needed, because the function will describe why the behavior occurred and continues to occur. Another example would be if we said the person is talking. To say someone is talking is describing the topography of the behavior, but tells us nothing about the function. Someone might talk to another person to ask for directions. Another person might talk to teach a class of students, while another person might talk to get the attention of someone they like. While a clear definition of the behavior's topography is needed, it is also important to identify and describe the function of the behavior to create an effective intervention plan. An easy way to remember the functions of behavior is the acronym SEAT, S-E-A-T, sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. We may engage in a behavior because it meets a physiological need. For example, we scratch an itch because it is an uncomfortable feeling and scratching it makes us feel better. This is the sensory function. Behavior that gets people out of doing something is the escape function. For example, a child may hit the teacher every time she asks him to complete a math worksheet, and as a result, she removes the math worksheet and leaves the child alone. Behavior that gets attention is the attention function. For example, a child may break a cup because doing so gets a reaction from the parent who was too busy to interact with him earlier. When engaging in the behavior gets people things they like, that is the tangible function, such as a child crying at the grocery store checkout for access to a chocolate bar. A behavior maintained by a sensory function, or automatic reinforcement, feels good physically, and this behavior will occur in all environments regardless of whether or not anyone is around to observe it. For example, a child could flap his or her hands because they like the visual stimulation, or you smell a flower because you like the scent. A behavior maintained by an escape function lets the person terminate or avoid altogether an unpleasant situation. This behavior will occur in situations when the task at hand is too difficult, or too easy in some situations, the person might be bored, and the person wants to get out of completing that task. For example, a child drops to the ground and cries when asked to hang up their coat, or when you leave the dentist office without booking your next appointment. A behavior maintained by an attention function allows the person to obtain attention or reactions from people, and this behavior will occur in situations when attention from others is minimal for a period of time or not available altogether. For example, a child screams in order to get mom to attend to him, or when you put something on social media hoping to get a reaction. When we think of attention in a traditional sense, we think of a nice interaction with someone and it's warm and fuzzy, but attention is also present in those not so nice interactions. Think of a reprimand, for instance. Saying something like, "No, don't do that. Stop it. We don't do that," provides sufficient attention to the child that they had been missing. And as a result, the challenging behavior will continue to occur as long as the adult continues to provide attention to the child in the form of reprimands after the behavior. A behavior maintained by a tangible function allows the person to obtain access to something highly preferred. And this behavior will occur in situations when the person does not have access to a desired item or activity. So think about what behaviors your children engage in to get things they want or need. This may include challenging behaviors like crying, flopping, or throwing toys. This may also include more appropriate forms of communication like asking using nice words, pointing, and pulling you towards something. Some examples might be a child who screams and cries because he wants to watch a video on the computer. Or have you ever seen someone arguing with a stranger over a parking spot at the mall? In summary, there are a handful of things that we would like you to take away from this presentation. Applied behavior analysis is used to change socially significant behaviors, like teaching someone functional skills so they could be more independent, such as reducing someone's aggression so they can participate in their community with their peers. A behavior is something that is observable and measurable. Every behavior has an antecedent, something that happens before the behavior occurs, and a consequence, something that happens after the behavior occurs. Antecedents set up the occasion for a behavior to occur, and consequences determine if the behavior will occur again in the future. Reinforcement means adding something desired to the environment or removing something undesired from the environment to increase the future likelihood of that behavior occurring again. Functions of behavior explain the variables that maintain behavior. An individual may engage in any behavior for one or more of the following reasons. Sensory, because it feels good. Escape or avoidance, because it lets them get out of doing something. Attention, because it gets them attention. Tangible, because it gets them the items or activities that they want. Before we sign off, I'd like to take a few minutes for you to do a quick self-audit of your understanding of the content that we covered in this session. You will see on the screen in front of you questions that will make you think about some ideas and concepts that we shared with you in the last hour or so. Once I have read the questions, you will have 10 seconds to write down on a sheet of paper or yell out loudly at the screen the best possible answer. At the end of the 10-second mark, I will reveal the right answer. Let's go. What does ABA stand for? The correct answer is B, Applied Behaviour Analysis. ABA is applied, behavioral, and analytic. Do you know your ABCs? Antecedents are what happened before the behavior occurred. The behavior is what did the child do, and consequences are what happened after the behavior occurred. Reinforcement, true or false. If I want my child to do something, I should give them a preferred item before they do it. This answer is false. That would be bribery. You want to make sure that you immediately reinforce the appropriate behavior after it occurs. Reinforcement, true or false. I should use a variety of items or activities as reinforcers. The correct answer is true. Reinforcement, true or false. It doesn't matter if I wait to deliver the reinforcer after the desired behavior. My child will make the connection. This answer is false. It is important to immediately reinforce the desired behavior. Reinforcement, true or false. It's best if I praise my child at the same time as delivering a reinforcing item. The correct answer is true. What's the function? Sensory provides stimulation. Escape removes undesired activities, interactions, or situations. Attention provides access to or awareness from other people. Tangible provides preferred items or activities. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope you found it informative and now have a better understanding of ABA. If you would like some more information, feel free to access these resources. Once again, thank you for being here today.